Restream before through
No,
Zoom?
no.
I just started messing with it. So it streams to my personal Facebook page and then
Okay,
my YouTube page as well simultaneously. And it's
cool.
it's interesting. Usually I just stream most of them to my Facebook page, but it's
Yeah,
nice to be able to multi-stream between the two. The
yeah.
only thing is I don't know if I need to do a paid version or something like that, but
I use a tool that live stream. So I live stream over LinkedIn and Twitter at the same time.
which I'm so jealous. I have bugged them 5 times now. I've submitted 5 times to get LinkedIn Live.
Yeah, yeah. No, I did the same. I bugged them early and a long time ago. I think what may have helped. So I've got a few courses on LinkedIn Learning,
Yeah.
and so I'll jabber on about those later if you want me to. But I think it was sort of a bit of a leg up, so I could say, look, I've created content for you, and I'm really eager to do more. And this live thing seems interesting. When I got started, it was not easy. Technically, it's a lot. There are a lot more steps than like Facebook live stream.
Just streaming, because it's not like, why the heck haven't they just built it in to the system? It doesn't make sense, LinkedIn.
Well, and what happened too is you watched some of the early pioneers who were given that very earliest beta start, and you were really, you were behind them, and you're like, you can do this, and they'd get online and they'd start streaming, and you couldn't hear them, or then you couldn't see them, or then you couldn't hear them and see them, and you saw them get frustrated so it was difficult. I figured it out a little bit, but I've got a guy who's by my side the whole time and helps me coordinate it all anyway. So it's cool. It works, and we can multi-stream over multiple channels, which
Does it go to, you're doing Facebook and YouTube and LinkedIn Live simultaneously?
So we do LinkedIn Live and Twitter simultaneously.
Oh,
we
okay.
can go to Facebook. It just generally, as far as this sort of that marketing decision of what personas and content do you put over which channels, and so Facebook is, we use in our line of work more as sort of building and introducing the culture of the organization, and it's more used for talent acquisition, just to attract good people, and this is our culture, versus the stuff I talk about, which is generally is more of a LinkedIn, Twitter kind of content. So
right, which is interesting. It seems a lot of the companies that are focused on recruiting top talent are growing the fastest, because a lot of those recruiting efforts kind of double up in as business development as well.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. And so we've got sort of the complexity of I'm chief strategy and marketing officer for Sykes. Sykes is
but so before we get too deep, just do that. Just give a quick 60-second synopsis of what led you to where you're. I mean, entrepreneurial dude over the years, but here you are in the CMO role, strategy role for a publicly traded company, and so. What was kind of some of the steps to that?
Yeah, no. How did I end up here? So I've, as you said, entrepreneurial. I've started 3 different companies in my life, and had also been at large organizations. I'd been in big consultancies and big outsourcing companies, and about 8 years ago was at a large outsourcing company. And for those not familiar, outsourcing is tapping into talent all over the world. Ultimately, and looking at and finding talented people in India and Guatemala and Brazil and China and in the Philippines, and at that time, people were looking at also how do you apply technology to, in some cases, emulate or copy some of that work, in some cases augment it, and so saw an opportunity to put on the entrepreneur hat one more time, and with a few co-founders started a consultancy that was employing what's called robotic process automation, and it was quite a ride. We had an element of luck and good timing on our side. We were in the right place at the right time, and grew an organization from the 4 founders to about 200 people as a consultancy, and then. We're looking at, do we get more funding to continue to grow, or do we entertain a trade sale and to sell the company? And we found a great company, and we decided it felt right to sell the company. So anyway, so that's how I came back to a large organization. That company is called Sykes Enterprises Incorporated. And I was asked to work directly with and for the CEO and serve, as you said, as both a strategy and a marketing role as the chief strategy officer and the chief marketing officer. And so that's where I am today. The Sykes is 55,000 people, 1.7 billion revenue, publicly traded. We're in 23 countries around the world, and our headquarters is in Tampa, Florida. So I moved my family from California to Tampa, and the rest is history. I've been having a blast getting to know a much larger family than the little 200-person family I had helped start, and have been working on how to build a really cool, modern brand, because so much of what we do is pretty darn impactful and powerful. And how do you use new tools to tell those stories?
Yeah.
That was not 60 seconds. I'm conscious of the fact, but I tried.
I love it, man. I like the details. And so many different, what would you say is one of the biggest misconceptions of being at the tip of the spear in strategy and business development and marketing in a $1 billion organization?
I guess personally that I know what I'm doing every day. I think the thing I enjoy the most.
Is that just part of being a marketer? I mean,
I am, the thing that motivates me the most and energizes me the most is the constant learning, the constant sort of journey of improvement, both for myself and the team, and and learning from everybody who we have the privilege of interacting with. We've got teams all over the world. We've got partners all over the world. And honestly, as you know so well, the dynamics of how do you build a brand? How do you engage with prospective, the shoppers and the buyers who are looking for a service or a product you have? That's evolving so rapidly that that was when I was building the brand of my small startup. It was more raw, not because the technology wasn't there, but partly because our budget wasn't there. We just had to build a brand and a name for ourselves through our own tenacity and through our own sort of our own ideas and our own voice to the market. Now I've got a much larger machine and have a much larger story to tell. And so like I said, I'm learning every day, every hour.
And that's probably attributed a lot to your success in your current role, is having that entrepreneurial background that maybe a lot of other marketers don't have, like a peek behind the curtain to. So they just kind of look at resources differently than probably you do. Even though it's a $1 billion company, you could waste a lot of dollars.
Yeah. I think I also bring a healthy imposter syndrome to the role, in so much as I wasn't officially trained as somebody who would become a chief marketing officer. I came to the craft out of both passion and necessity. I love this stuff. I love storytelling. I love trying to find the nuance and the elements that really matter to the audience. But I didn't go to school for it.
That's something, in doing lots of interviews, a lot of successful people have shared with me, is that imposter syndrome. How do you deal with that? How do you manage that? How do you overcome something like that?
Just keep going.
And you got a lot more eyeballs on you than others in other marketing roles.
Yeah. I mean, but just being honest with yourself and continue going. And then also, not present yourself to be anybody you're not. I think my team knows that I very much learn from them and count on them and wouldn't be anything without them. So that's it. I would never dare present that I knew more than I do, because I don't think it helps me or the mission. If someone finds me being the sort of the blind leading the charge, that's not a good thing for anybody.
Right. I think probably the majority of people who are observing you, studying you, listening to this podcast, they're not working with a $1 billion company size marketing budget. They're probably in a position where you were building your company in kind of that mid-market. So, I mean, man, with all the changes, obviously we're all sick of talking about COVID, but you got to mention it, the changing landscape. Like, if you had to start with a mid-sized budget or from no budget whatsoever, what would you be doing? What are the immediate channels, action strategies you'd be diving into?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think first of all, we are so incredibly privileged to be where we are at this time in the evolution of technology and business. And COVID's an interesting one because COVID has made us all quite comfortable with a level of fidelity and resolution that isn't like professional production quality, right? And that we're watching, that we're watching newscasters and major networks presenting from their home offices and sitting on their own stairs, and we're cool with it. And that's resonating throughout enterprises too. I mean, everybody is on Zoom or Google Hangout or Teams calls, what have you, whatever tool you use. And our family members are walking into the frame. I mean, heck, the number of dogs that have made it into major corporate all hands meetings and staff meetings these days is overwhelming. And so we're more comfortable with the humanity of ourselves. And I think I think it's such a unique opportunity to capitalize on that. And so again, if I were starting again, I'd do a lot of what I did before, which is embrace the channels that are getting out to the market that you need to get to. LinkedIn, I'm just so enamored by. I mean, I love the channel. I love the access to people all over the world for virtually free. And the way that you create a brand and a name for yourself is to just to say something. Hopefully have something to say, but say something and say it often, and not be cowed or intimidated by the fact that you're now online and you're now having to be much more open about the message. And if Facebook is the right channel for you, if Instagram is the right channel, Twitter, TikTok, I mean, heck, any of those, whatever you're selling, whatever product you're trying to get to, there is a community on one, if not multiple of those channels, and they're all virtually free, and they are all begging for people to be interesting and to share their message on them. So you don't need a budget to get started. You just have to have a story.
All the tools are there. I mean, literally before the podcast started, you and I were just talking about recording content on our cell phones.
Yeah.
I mean, guys, this is a CMO of $1 billion company, and we're talking about creating content on our cell phones.
I cannot say, and I guess any smartphone, not to single out Apple products, but man, the iPhone is the most powerful device on the planet. Not just because it's got cool tech and its screen's neat and it's high, but because it does enable anybody to tell whatever story they want to, and then to distribute it anywhere they want to. I've used it in multiple ways too. I mean, we use it internally for just sort of communication and alignment, but also education. Right? We have our sales teams when they host a client or go present to a client. I showed you some of my like my kit of like travel with a tripod, mount your camera,
and experimenting too. Even at the stage you're at, you're experimenting with all the different stuff that people think there's like, oh, I need the perfect setup before I get started creating content or putting myself out there.
No, I mean, and you're right. You absolutely just keep iterating, improving. Because again, people's people's with the resolution and the quality, as long as the sound doesn't suck, as long as the video actually functions. But we've used it to just record in the moment, just what went well in that sales presentation, what really landed, what was their feedback, because you lose some of that, you lose some of the value if you just wait for the flight home to start to document in an email to everybody what just happened. Document in the moment, the experience customers are having with the product, or what you're getting is feedback from the market. And it's the best way in the world to educate your own teams, to disseminate that knowledge internally. And then we've got the whole external
recruiting, internal comm, and obviously the external. And dude, you're so unique in the way that you've built your personal brand as a marketer. Did you have reservations on that in the beginning when you first started kind of tasting that? Or did you you're like, this is what I got to do. And you just dove right in? Or were you kind of, what was going through your head in the beginning when you started putting yourself out there, so to say?
It's interesting. I guess I'd always, this is more backstory than perhaps is necessary, but I always liked performing. I did that when I was younger. And so I wasn't ever, I think there's some elements to just, projecting and knowing your sight lines and knowing how to get a message out. The technology enabled it more and more recently. There were some gentle nuances just because, again, I co-founded a company. I had other founders with me, and I was with them. And so you needed to be sensitive about how I didn't intend it to be the me show. I didn't want it to be all about me, but whomever of us is comfortable just getting out there and doing it needs to do it so that we do get the message out, because the comparable value of that is just incalculable. I mean, just the number of reservations and show bookings and stage events that we would have had to pay for to get the same sort of domain authority effectively would have been prohibitive. And so I guess to some degree I gravitated towards it anyway. And it was an absolute necessity. If we wanted to stand out above the din, if we wanted to have a brand and a personality, somebody had to do it. And I was comfortable doing it. So, and you asked this at the beginning of the show too.
Yeah.
It's I'm still trying to figure this out, and I could be stepping way outside my bounds. But when it's your company and it's small, and the worst, I mean, if you screw it up or you embarrass yourself, there's a smaller cascading effect of having done so. And when you're in a larger public company, you got to make sure that you're not a total idiot publicly, because you are representing a much larger brand. Now, the great thing is I've got tremendous support from executive leadership because we're telling a good story. We're having really interesting and thoughtful and relevant discussions with visionaries in our space and in sort of tangential and associated spaces. And I haven't been so much of an idiot that they've pulled me off the air yet. So yeah.
Well, I think the veil's unlifted in a lot of ways, right? I'm a younger millennial, and where a lot of younger millennials are moving into these very large business decision making positions. Is that the term? Yeah, that was it. CEO roles, marketing roles, procurement roles, and all that. And the transparency, again, these companies that were kind of very secretive, kind of behind closed off in the office, exposure, right? Yeah. And that actually draws people more to your brand. So it's impressive how you've done it. So many, again, someone who's in a startup company and they have 10 people, or they have 100,000 people in their company. I feel like a lot of marketers are still struggling with this. They intuitively know they need to do what you're doing. They need to build more personal brand, amplify through more personal brands. And you've even mentioned you've had challenges with the sales team and getting them to implement that stuff. So how have you initially, how'd you initially sell that transformation? And do you think marketers need to take the lead on it in building their personal brands to start to show the other team, hey, this is what we need to be doing?
I think there's certainly there's value in forging the path and showing that it's not impossible, and giving people the courage to take the leap as well. It is interesting as you get to larger organizations, sometimes you find there's an interesting dynamic and divide between marketing and sales. So you have to navigate that one carefully.
There can't be anymore. There just really can't be.
Amen. I completely agree with that. I think one of my as I said, one of the areas that I'm passionately learning at all times and really focused on now is that sort of the awareness to purchase framework, and just the attribution, just the finding how to turn that into as much of a science as humanly possible, to understand what's really resonating, what's really adding value, and why anything happened. Because I think there was too much black magic and art to, we closed the deal because that was amazing and I got it across the line. And I feel like there's more to that story than just that, but we didn't have the data to really microanalyze it. And now we have quite a bit more access to data if we've got the right systems in place and the right procedures and processes in place. And then you got to build the rapport and the respect between these organizations so that they they congratulate each other on the roles that they collectively played to win these deals. So that's a challenge. But if you can build that good rapport and that good trust and the sort of the cross pollination, then sure, then marketing can show sales what it looks like to post some videos online, to share their points of view on an article they read, on a deal they just won, on an idea they literally just had while in the shower. It's not that hard. And then you're creating your own content. Then you're not throttled by editorial calendars and timelines. And then honestly, an area I'm getting into, which I'm really, really intrigued by, is just the content library. And the fact that I've been doing this long enough that it'll pop up that someone likes something I posted online 4 years ago. And I don't know how they stumbled on it. I don't know how they found it. I mean, there are people who are sharing stuff that is now old, but still relevant. And it's in this library that just lives forever. It's there really is such thing as a permanent record now. And I love that. So it doesn't exist if you don't start. You just gotta start making content and making as much good content as you possibly can.
Yeah, because I see a lot of people doing the opposite. Is we need lots of content, and then they're spamming stuff that's not even theirs, their voice, their perspective. But yeah, it's like, and some people too, they're like, well, I'm not that personality. I think you got to find that personality. Now, lack of travel, trade shows, conferences. How are you guys navigating that with the lack of travel and the lack of events? What are some of the pivots that you're making?
Yeah, again, I think it's just because we're all in the same boat. It would be different if this was, throughout my career, there've been these examples. If this was a volcano in Iceland that erupted and shut down travel from one point to another, it would be different. But this volcano erupted over the whole planet.
That was a very specific example too.
It's a very specific example.
You were going to Iceland one time and you're like, damn it.
Exactly. I was supposed to be in Bratislava for a workshop about 10 years ago, and this volcano erupted and I never got to go to Bratislava. To this day, I've never been there. And it clearly weighs on me. But or a tsunami or an earthquake or any sort of regionalized event. This is pandemic. This is global. And so therefore, no one can travel. And so everyone's trying to figure out how do you hold these virtual events. And so everyone's open to the kludginess of a virtual event. And I actually just had that discussion with someone earlier today about how do you approximate the unstructured networking? How do you approximate just the bumping into people like you would over the coffee table at an event? And I don't know that you can, but we're trying. And there's a lot of industry analysts and a lot of product companies, service companies that are trying to use these virtual events. And because of the time we're in, everyone's acceptant of it. So, and frankly, I guess there's two different things. One, I had this discussion with people too. When you travel, you've got these pockets of focus time, which I'm realizing I don't have anymore. So I'm not sitting on planes for 12 hours, really just nailing a white paper. I have families coming in and out. I'm surprised they haven't in the course of this conversation. So
we'll interview them also.
Maybe that's great. We also just got a puppy. So if you're interested in interviewing a puppy, he's a little nippy, but
what kind of puppy?
A mini golden doodle.
Oh man, it's probably so cute.
He looks like a Muppet. He's hilarious. He's very
You need
fun.
to get some content out with that golden doodle
There we
if
go.
you haven't already.
I have posted an image on my Instagram page with me and him. There's the lack of focus with the lack of travel, but there's also, I mean, if you're not traveling, you have no excuse to not picked up your cadence of outreach tenfold, because you're not standing in a TSA line, because you're not fighting to try to find your luggage, you're not waiting for a cab. You got a lot more time to be reaching out over all the virtual channels we have and trying to build virtual rapport, with the promise of one day I'd love to buy you a coffee face to face, but let's connect this way for the time being. So I think, I would expect, obviously that's very specific to certain businesses. Other businesses are being absolutely decimated right now. But I think in some cases it's a tremendous opportunity for certain areas and industries to really grow now.
Yeah, it's like this big land grab, and that's great validation hearing from you, someone in your position too. There's this monster land grab right now that are going to take advantage of it. 24, 36, 48 months from now is going to be that next, 6, 7, 8 figure deal in the door.
Yeah, that's right. The number of seeds you can plant right now that'll germinate 100%. Over that time period, depending on the industry you're in, and in the industry we're in, sometimes you're lucky if something blooms in 4 months, but usually it's 12. But as you said, you should be planting like mad right now.
100%. So when you say virtual events, you and your team are actually hosting almost kind of like, is it more like a networking type ordeal or more like webinar style? What's kind of going through your head about that?
Yeah, I'd love it to be more cool than this, but it's more the webinar style still right now. And we're trying to figure out the round table and the collaborative, just sort of communal gatherings. But for the most part, it's webinars either that we sponsor through some of our analyst partners, or we're trying to set up on our own. So, but we're examining every option at the moment.
Yeah. So when you say sponsor, you'll get a partner and put your logo up and the co-marketing with their webinar, but then they would actually host it.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. I mean, a specific example, there's a research firm called HFS Research in the outsourcing space, a huge network, very well known, been around for over a decade. We just did a workshop or a webinar last week with them talking about our work at home offering and our Prosperity Hub offering. So 2 different topics, but Prosperity Hubs, where we're creating meaningful jobs in generally some of the more challenged communities domestically in the US. And so we've done some really awesome work with Intuit, it's our client. And so they were on this webinar with us. And part of the story, which wasn't the original intent, but it presented itself to us, was how rapidly we pivoted the delivery of that to work at home because we had to close the buildings or limit the just the number of people that could be in the building because of social distancing. So it was a great webinar. It was a really compelling topic and very timely. So that worked. We had several hundred registrants. We had 150 people attend. And I'd do that every day of the week if we had the bandwidth. And it's a lot, but it also isn't putting on an in-person event. So I guess that is a benefit. You can really get the numbers there. People can watch it on their own time. They get the post recording. And this is something I'm even trying to get better at myself. And I've just in learning from large companies and larger marketers like yourself is that co-marketing, that co-collaboration and co-content creation. What kind of advice would you give to co-hosting a webinar successfully that actually drives revenue? So these aren't necessarily the cheapest option, but you really are going after the established experts and to partner with them. So in this case with HFS, they're an established expert. They have a large Rolodex, and so you partner with them and you got to be real nuanced about the message. It's not a commercial. You can't be selling someone your product because everyone tunes out to commercials. So it's got to be a discussion about relevant topics, sharing genuine insight into something. And so So you pick the right distribution partner for that message. And in this case, they happen to be that because they care about the topic. So you can usually find that in the form of either the analysts and or the advisors in your space, or there are just folks who bring attendance to you. So their job is just to make sure a lot of people show up. I've tried that as well. They tend to be more expensive for the return, and or just by lists. And ultimately, that's kind of what you need to be working on always, is just building your own list organically.
Yeah.
Because you were unshackled if you can put out enough content to build your own list to create your own sort of cascading effect of more and more people following you and more of it converting to work.
So you would actually invest into some of these people and compensate for them to come in and co-host and bring in their audiences, or some sort of cross revenue share. There's a number of different ways.
Revenue share is more I haven't seen that done. It's certainly possible. It's just more complex.
Yeah.
You kind of don't want to. Yeah.
Not to cut you off, but you as a marketer, are you actually sitting there with a partner and like co-creating slides and the webinar together, or kind of take something they have already?
It's in this case, it's something that we had. So I mean, they top and tail it. I suppose they put something in the beginning and the ends just to both introduce themselves and the research that they do, and then the meat is then a facilitated discussion between. In this case, I mean, heck, if you can bring a customer, that's the best thing on earth, because if it's just you presenting your own product, then it lacks the sort of the compelling element. So if you can have a customer talk on your behalf, then you're golden. You've nailed it. Just make sure that they also understand that. Again, I think information wins always. Advertisement turns people away, and so it's more about sort of what was the problem they faced and how was it that your relationship helped them to address the problem and create some sort of outcome or benefit that others might also find useful.
Yeah. Well, I think that's helpful. I like that idea. Again, I'm trying to improve on that. I think most people need to get into that collaboration marketing more than just direct hammering home, bring in other influencers. It doesn't have to be a big, sexy influencer. Someone who has an audience and a great product, great service.
Oh yeah. I think that's the beauty of the democratization of broadcasting, thanks to the internet, is there are lots of vibrant niche communities, and depending on what you sell and what you do, there's almost certainly a niche community out there that cares about what you're doing. Find them and find the influencers and the people who established it or who were recognized in it.
Right. So real quickly, you've been interviewed, you get interviewed, you speak, you do your own podcast. What are people not asking you that you think would be important to share or teach someone at this point in time?
Interesting. Well, that's a curveball. What are they not asking me? They're not asking me that question, I'll tell you that much. I don't know. I mean, maybe it's sort of the motivation of why I've been able to do those things, why I've been able to just to put out content and to build hopefully the brand that I'm in the very early processes of building. And again, it sort of falls back to just passion and just an absolute commitment to there's got to be an interesting way to tell a story. And in a lot of cases, I tried. It ends up being a lot about the person who's presenting it, but you don't want it to necessarily be that. You keep going until you become less of the story and the content becomes the main event. And that's actually why I love doing the video podcast I do, is because it's called One Take, and it's called One Take for two reasons. One, because I shoot it in one take, so it's an allusion to no post-production. But the other reason is because it's a perspective. It's that one take from my guest, and so I work really hard to try to make it about them. and try to understand them. And then there's sort of a resonant benefit and effect of just, hopefully I've brought interesting perspectives to bear for people, and they see a value in continuing to tune into me, and listen to what I'm bringing to them. So
It's a great podcast. I'd recommend everyone go listen to it. I enjoyed it. You're a great host, and great listener and everything. And it's amazing. Like, I know for me personally, what podcasting has done, starting this 4 years ago, when people are still kind of like, what's this podcasting thing? You know? And I know people who've done it for 10 years and 12 years, and it's crazy, but, and I didn't mean to put you on your heels with that question. It's always interesting to hear kind of what's in your head that people maybe aren't asking you, that you're passionate about talking about or want to teach about. And so maybe we can touch on that very quickly, but I am curious, what are the implications you found just podcasting alone as a medium? What's happened from a business perspective, personal branding perspective, and your own personal life?
Yeah. My own personal life, I'm followed by fans all the time. It's like
they're popping out of bushes.
It's like one of those Beatles movies where they're just screaming after me as I run down the street. Yeah. No, that is not.
Can't take your kids out in public anymore.
No, it's terrible. It's terrible.
You were doing face masks before even COVID happened.
That's right. Exactly. Before it was safe, or for safety oriented. No, that is not what happened. It keeps you top of mind in a broad, in a sort of a general sense, with hopefully a lot of people that could, you're kind of just increasing the likelihood of luck, I suppose. It's that old saying of the harder I work, the luckier I get. And so just the more content you put out, the more you just stay on top of people's minds, the more they'll think about you if something comes up that might be relevant to what you were talking about or what you're doing. And so I found that as an internal communication mechanism, which I hadn't initially intended it to be, but a lot of, again, happen to be in a larger organization now, and there are a lot of people who are part of the organization, part of the Sykes family, all over the planet, who tune in and watch. And those are folks that I wouldn't necessarily have the chance to share the plans, the mission, just the tone with as frequently. So I love that. I love that people, and live stream allows people to say, hi, I'm listening in from wherever. And so, folks from Egypt and Costa Rica and the Philippines and to down the street, wherever they're dialing in from, it's a really powerful internal communication mechanism. So I like that. So those are some real benefits from it. And I'm continuing to study and learn the craft. As you know, and you've been at it for years, and you find yourself watching and studying folks for tips and tricks. I watch the news intently, not for the news, but just to see, like, how do they not blink so often? And they're looking at the camera and they're not looking down, and they don't go a lot. And like, how is that possible? I need to be like that person. So I'm always sort of learning the craft. And then there's that interview process, and I'm far from good at that. But it's, how do you ask a question and then stay out of the way? How do you follow up but not summarize what the person just said? Because I haven't heard any good interviewer necessarily do that, and I found myself doing that too much. So I love it. I love the craft. I love the fact that hopefully I'm heading in the right direction of getting better. So and it gives you a chance to do this, to interact with interesting people and just hear their points of view in ways that you might not otherwise do.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. I love that. Yeah, I think even just normal day conversations to podcasting, for me personally, such a different shift in like talking to people and like really learning how to listen what people are saying.
Yes.
You find yourself so much listening to people, but not actually listening to people.
oh, I'm just waiting for you to stop talking so I can say something. But
Exactly.
you're right. So you have to learn to absorb and listen and interpret and then place it. And then, as you say, it's a rally. You've got to keep it going. So it's kind of like improv, I suppose. I mean, depends on how much energy and emotion you want in any particular industry you're in, but you really gotta sort of vibe off of each other and keep the discussion going. So.
Yeah, it's a different animal. When you're here in Denver, we'll pop into the studio together and do a real podcast. Air quotes. I'm using air quotes, guys. Real podcast. No, but dude, I'm so grateful for you taking the time to share, and the insights were incredible. And we'll have to have you back again here soon down the road. Before we do jump, anything else that you just want to share freely, chat about, touch on?
I think everyone should, if you're in marketing, if you see the value in passionate storytelling, just do it. Just get over any particular fear. The most you should ever give yourself is a few bullet points of a script idea. Don't ever sit down and start crafting what the message is you're going to say. Because if you know anything about what you actually do for a living, you've already got all the information in your head. Just get it out. And the first time you see yourself on video, if you've never done it before, you'll think it sucks and you'll be completely uncomfortable with it. And you'll think your voice sounds weird, and you'll scrutinize and criticize everything about it. Most people don't see most of that. So just keep going and tweak and get better as you go, because that's what I tell everyone on my team to do, and I hope some of them embrace it, and everyone should. And it's a lot of people just, it isn't for them, and that's probably okay too, because it leaves more room for the rest of us to get a message out.
I love it, man. And shout out how can people find your podcast and follow you, get into contact with you?
Perfect. So thank you. So I'm on LinkedIn at Ian Barkin. So just first name, last name. On LinkedIn, you'll actually find my reference to LinkedIn courses that I've done on LinkedIn Learning. If anyone's interested in robotic process automation, or the other course is RPA, AI, and cognitive tech for leaders. So it's helping enterprises understand how to really embrace this modern set of technologies. The video podcast is called One Take. It's on the Sykes website. So if you go to sykes.com/one take, so sykes.com/one take, you will find it. And then it's got associated podcast channels on Podbean, Stitcher, and iTunes, all for One Take. So I think that's it. We've got Instagram too, but so many channels, and Twitter. I'm on Twitter as well.
Everywhere. Find them.
And MySpace. Check me out on MySpace.
Yeah, right.
So
we didn't realize that they were teaching us to code way back before we even thought about it.
It's fun, and it's it's become such a. Anyway, I'm fascinated by the whole thing. I think just the social channels, the access we all have, the power we've got from simply the iPhones in our pockets and the internet to distribute it is so incredibly liberating, and some people and younger generations are growing up in it. I've got two younger daughters, 10 and 8, who are the most, it's interesting to sort of interpret what do we mean by digital native, but they are so comfortable
onto it,
just presenting and talking, and they do the openings and the closings of like, hi guys, my name is whatever, and I'm here doing whatever. And if
you have a YouTube channel for them, don't you?
I you know what, I don't, because it's always a little questionable how much you want to have your children's content out there, but man, they are just so natural at it. And I think in a similar fashion as sort of show choir and musical theater and acting did for me as a kid, and I just shared a whole lot there. They are just starting with this as a medium that they're just intimately familiar with. So I can't imagine what social media channels will be like in 10 years as these folks just naturally just nail it. So It's going to be, it's going to be amazing.
Crazy. Oh, and by the way, those of you listening, I did start your course on LinkedIn. It's really interesting stuff. That digital transformation. We'll have to do a whole nother podcast on this, but this whole world of digital transformation is very scary, very convoluted to a lot of people. And you've done a really good job at just kind of laying down the foundations for it in a not super technical way. So I'm excited to dive into it. And we'll get all your links in the show notes. Guys, go follow this guy, go study him.
Awesome. Thank you.
Your information is great. Your podcast is great. Can't thank you enough for stopping by.
I love it.
And we'll see you guys on the next one.
Absolutely.